Hello, hello. Welcome to the PG-ish podcast. I'm Erin with your parental guidance to help you grow yourself as a parent and raise healthy, happy, and successful humans. If you're like me, between the balancing act of work, life, and school, and the ramping up of the craziest months of the year, that being the holiday season, you may be barely hanging on, and very likely not taking care of yourself. But I'm going to ask you to take care of yourself and reach out for help if you think you need it. And heck, even if you don't feel like you need it, having a neutral party in your corner is important, especially if you don't feel like you have a very supportive community. So shout out to one of our sponsors, BetterHelp Online Therapy. With a team of licensed therapists and counselors, BetterHelp offers confidential and convenient online therapy sessions that you can access from the comfort of your own home. Their online platform is easy to use and offers a variety of therapy options, including chat, phone, and video sessions. Whether you sign up and stay for a month or for years, their therapists can provide the guidance and support you need. To take the first step toward a happier, healthier you, sign up with BetterHelp at betterhelp.com/PGish to save 10%. You, your mental health, and your family are worth investing in. And one more shout out for my Reary to Revived course, which is a self-led 5-week class designed to create a blueprint to feel, heal, and redefine joy on your own terms. If you're feeling out of sorts lately, this course will support you in rediscovering yourself and your values. You will learn how to create boundaries and implement them, make better decisions, have more fun, and learn new methods on how to be more productive and efficient, while still enjoying feeling grounded in you. Head over to my website, pgishparenting.com, to learn more. Okay, speaking of navigating motherhood, which is clearly a topic near and dear to me, and always top of mind, I'm going to ask for your forgiveness, because I have another week focused on motherhood in America today, which, if you're not living it, is kind of a sad state. Last week, Chelsea Conaboy, author of Mother Brain, shared her thoughts on maternal instinct, matrescence, and how we can do a better job at supporting families. Today, Jessica Grose, author of Screaming on the Inside, The Unsustainability of American Motherhood, focuses more on clearly that, how motherhood has become unsustainable. Like I said last week, women are getting louder, and yes, there has been significant change in the last 60 years, but we still have a ways to go for mothers to feel seen and heard, and to come up with some better solutions. Personally, I'd add a better support for single moms. I guess all single parents, actually, but I can only speak from my experience as a single mama. And what's interesting is that I heard a stat the other day that the average woman peaks in her career at age 44. Well, I'm only a couple years away from that, and that stat is pretty depressing, and it's a narrative that I'm not going to accept. Anyway, not to get off topic here, because as I said, this topic is near and dear to me, but I'll let you dig into this interview with Jessica Grose. To preface it, I don't usually include interviews nor clips that are longer than 15 minutes, but today I'm making an exception to the rule. So with that, here's Jessica.
If you had to tell one story that you think encapsulates this book, what is it?
I think it would be just an experience that I had in the middle of the pandemic, which was the summer of 2020. Not a great time for most people. I was listening to a conference call on my headphones while changing the laundry from the washer to the dryer. It was like around noon, so I could hear my children whining in the background because they were hungry. And it just felt like an encapsulation of everything that had happened and that I was being pulled in every possible direction in the same minute. And so obviously the pandemic was the typical parenting experience on steroids, but I felt like nothing I had read really expressed that feeling of being pulled in so many directions and sort of failing at each task that was possible. So I was only half listening to the work call.
Right.
And the laundry was being shoved in a very aggressive manner.
You weren't separating the whites of the darks.
Right. Was not separating. The children were hungry. They were not being fed, or they were being half watched at best. So I felt like that the pandemic, I think, did that for a lot of people, where it was like things were manageable beforehand for a lot of people, but not ideal, and often felt like it wasn't working in the way that you would want it to. And it just really crystallized in that moment. And that was around when I started writing the proposal for the book and sort of flowed from there.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing for me that resonates a lot with this is just this feeling of like you're not doing anything at 100%. That like somehow it's which is encapsulated in the story, that it's like very difficult to feel like you're kind of crushing it at the conference call and also the lunch. And even like, I just want to say, like, I'm doing this interview and I feel I'm doing like, so far, pretty good job. But on my phone, my 7-year-old is texting me that his sister has a temperature of 99.9, and then there's a lot of crying emojis. And so it's sort of like, it's a moment. All right. So why is it American motherhood though?
So I think the American context is so particular, especially among our peer nations. So any country that is as wealthy as ours gives more to parents and to children. We are one of the few nations that doesn't have paid sick leave, does not have universal health care, does not have any child care support, just kind of any of the social safety net things that allow, it doesn't make parenting easy, but it certainly makes it function in a much more seamless way. I mean, just the way that we approach child care is bananas. And it makes everyone feel, if you are a family that either has a single parent or both parents working, there is this sort of feeling that you're having to navigate the system by yourself, and you're the first person who's ever done it. And that's because there's no one to help you, and that there's no sort of system surrounding it. I mean, not even federal or local systems, but now there's 100,000 fewer childcare workers than pre-pandemic, but there just isn't enough supply to meet the demand. Yeah. So, I mean, just the sheer energy it takes to navigate that. Many books have been written just about that. So I think obviously the American context is the one that I know the best, but I think that there are unique features to it that make it more difficult for the average person to be a parent.
So I want to dig into this because I think this piece about the childcare strikes me as quite important. So even sort of putting aside the pandemic, when of course the childcare was complicated for a bunch of other reasons, the kind of inability of people to access childcare in America seems quite unusual. And I think people find themselves in this sort of like, you could have a nanny, but that is incredibly expensive. Or you could send your child to daycare, also very expensive, but not really like difficult to even find. What is it about the system here that makes that true?
Oh, I mean, there really isn't a system. Okay. So, I mean, the way that childcare is expensive, full stop. It should be expensive. You do not want the budget version of taking care of your infant. Like, I don't think anyone feels cool about that. Like, it should be high quality. And so the people who are doing it should be skilled, and they should be paid a good wage. That costs a lot of money. There's also insurance, there's space. Like, it is never going to be something that is inexpensive. And it is not inexpensive in these other countries, but what it is subsidized by their governments. And it is part of a system. And so it's different. It's slightly different in every country, but, it works not completely unlike the way the education system works. It's not your taxes pay for the public education system, and you send your child. You're not individually having to be like, my kid is going to second grade. I guess I have to figure out how that works. Like, that's not how we do it. And so in other countries, it just extends down to, 1 year old. I mean, the other part of it is in most of
it's 1 year old. It's not 6 weeks old.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the other part of it, is that there's paid parental leave. And in many places, our lovely neighbors to the north, Canada, for one, it's a full year that the birth mother will get off from her job and be allowed to go back to it. So yeah, it's just a much more difficult, individualized and individualistic context. And parents are paying more out of their pocket. And that's just how it works, unfortunately.
So I want to do a few different conversations about solutions, but if we sort of think about this solution as like particular thing, is it just subsidies. So is it just that people need to be paid more, and the way the market works is if we could pay people more, then we could have more of them?
Well, no, I mean, we're seeing this in New York. New York City is sort of a microcosm, right? They're not doing something with daycare, but they're extending the school system downward. So they're trying to do universal 3K. First they did universal pre-K, and then they did universal 3K. And I may get some of these details incorrect because I don't have the articles in front of me, but I'm trying to be as accurate as possible. It takes a while to roll out. You have to find the spaces to have and not just the providers, you have to find the real estate. It doesn't work particularly well. The supply and demand is going to take a while to get the fit right. So there's like all of these parts of it. And again, it has to be, that's just adding to an existing system. You would actually have to create the system because the way it's paid for now is block grants. And that is depending on the state you live in. That's not.
Tell people what block grants. Like, you got
the federal government gives a block of money to a state, and the state has to figure out how it is going to there are strings attached, and it's not like, oh, we gave you this money for childcare. Why don't you use it on ponies? Like, you can't just do that. Like, there's specific things that you have to use it for. But because of our particular form of government, each state doesn't use it in the exact same way. And so that's also complicated. There's, depending on the country, more of a federal system, but I mean, it depends, Canada, each province kind of does its own thing. So that was a long-winded and complicated answer because it's a complicated problem.
It's an extremely complicated problem.
But basically, I mean, to make it like other countries, we would have to either make it part of the school systems that already exist or create a new system from the ground up, which doesn't really exist. And now it's all just except for Head Start, which serves only the poorest Americans, and it does not serve all of them. I think it's something like a seventh or an eighth of eligible children are served by Head Start. So there are many eligible children who are not getting to use that program. But, you can make universal Head Start. I don't know. I don't make policy.
No, we don't make policy. Yeah, but I mean,
we just complain about it.
We just complain. It's so easy. It's so easy to complain. No, and I mean, I think the point about sort of like the age groups, I think is very meaningful, because the difference between the sort of kind of care that you need for a 6-week-old and the kind of care you need for a 2-year-old is very different. And it's much easier to imagine expanding the school system down to serve 2-year-olds than it is to expanding it down to serve 2-month-olds.
Right.
And it's just like a totally different set of skills.
Right. And I think, when you talk about the policies, the one that is the most popular and I think has the most chance of being enacted at the federal level is paid leave for new parents. And it's because it's just obvious. You ask any person on the street, regardless of their political affiliation, do you think it's a good idea to send a person who gave birth 4 weeks ago back to a job? Most of them are going to be like, that sounds like a terrible idea. Right. And so it's logical. And so I'm, as much as I am somewhat pessimistic about sort of other safety net programs happening, I'm optimistic that we will get there for paid family leave.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think part of what's my sense of the politics here is because it is so popular, it's something you want to like stick into every bill, to like make that bill more, so you have like a crummy bill. You're like, put this in. Everybody likes this. And then it doesn't get through.
I mean, we don't have enough time to talk about the sausage making process in the federal government and how it is not working great. But I think if we could have a standalone bill that was just paid leave,
we would get it through.
I think so.
I think that's right.
I mean, again, I'm not a betting woman, so wouldn't bet it.
That seems right to me. So we talked about the American piece. I want to talk about the motherhood piece. Yeah. There are some men here. We said, what would be the 4? But I think this is a unique problem. The sort of policy problem is a problem for families. But this problem that you described at the beginning about like the laundry is happening at the same time and the kids are yelling, like that is a problem that seems to be at least more frequently experienced by mothers.
Right.
And I wonder, is that like inevitable?
Kind of. I will say, like, I could give you the whole, like, historical spiel, which I will spare you, but I think the patterns get ingrained really early. And so there's tons of research that show, because especially if you're in a couple that is a biological mother who has given birth and a father, so like a heteronormative situation, starting from day one, if the mother's breastfeeding, if she is the one changing the diapers, like those patterns of baby care just get so ingrained. And so and you can steal this line if you don't have kids yet and you plan to have one. Anytime my husband would turn to me and be like, I don't know how to do this. What does she want? And I would be like, I don't know. I don't speak baby. Like, I'm new to this too. You have to figure it out along with me. And I think there is a sense where often in heterosexual couples, men are not doing the hands-on work from day one. And it actually really matters. I mean, of course you can reverse course and, make it more even. But I don't think it's inevitable, but I think that there's a lot of both internal and external pressures that make it the path of least resistance to have the mother be the main parent.
Yeah. So there's this idea in economics of sort of like learning by doing and specialization that, it's sort of more efficient if people specialize. And there's also like very strong, like as you do something more, you get better at it. And so if I'm doing more of this just like sort of in the first 2 weeks and then I become really good at it, then it's actually like kind of frustrating to go backwards. And it's much faster for me to do it and then for me to keep doing it. And then you never learn to do it.
I mean,
you know how to do it.
In the book, I talked to parents who are, trying to push back against these norms, whether they were couples that were not heterosexual, so it was two women, because it was a focus on motherhood. I didn't talk to two male couples, or, I didn't end up talking to any non-binary parents, but there's, even if you are in those couples and you have to kind of educate the world around you. So if you're in a heterosexual couple and you're trying to say like, oh, actually the dad is the lead parent or he's going to do this. There was a mom I talked to who really was 50-50 with her husband and was trying to get the pediatrician's office to call the dad. It was like, no, he is managing this. And the receptionist was like, well, don't you know his schedule? And she was like, no, I don't. Like, just call him. You have his number. We told you to call him. And so she just described like having to train the world around them to treat her husband as an equal partner. So even if you are in your own house trying to have, things be as equal as possible, it's the path of least resistance to not. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think it does make sense. Yes. No, I think it does make sense. And it's like the policy problem, I think a complicated one to think about fixing because like many of these problems, like in every moment, it would be easier not to fix it.
Right.
And it is like something where consciously you have to be like, no, you're going to change the diaper. And then it's like takes a really long time. But it's like sleep training or something, right? Like the first night's really bad and then they like get better. The diaper changing. So we should think about like sleep, it's like training.
Right.
Diaper training. Yeah.
And there was actually a really great book called Spouseonomics that was written about, I think 10 years ago
Is it by an economist?
It was by finance writers.
Okay.
Wall Street. One of them, they either both worked at the Wall Street Journal or one did. One is now my colleague at the Times who works in audio. And it was all about specialization and like how to specialize and be most efficient in your tasks. And I think we do that to some extent.
Definitely.
But, it's hard to not always get the short end of the stick in that.
Yeah. And I think there is often like a balance between efficiency and equity in this, it's sort of in this space that like, so when I was a kid, my parents, my mother insisted that my parents each cook every other night because like it was very important to her that things be equal. But like my father was a really bad cook. And so like he only knew how to make like 4 things. And so it was quite bad in terms of efficiency because if we never got better, there was no learning by doing, to do the same 4 things every time. But it was very equal.
Right. Right.
Very equal.
Well, that's the thing too. I think sometimes the conversation gets into sort of like this rhetorical cul-de-sac because I don't know that even having everything be 50-50 is necessarily the goal. I think it's a sense every couple is its own sort of system. And I think it's having more of a sense of fairness and that, I think that the mother is not just the default. And I think that takes work, but I think that is a more realistic goal than necessarily having everything be 50-50 or even not having the mother probably doing like slightly more especially in the near term. I think part of what I tried to do with the book is show, even if things seem sort of backlogged and like things aren't moving fast enough in the direction that some people would want it to go in, we have made a huge change in the past 50 years. I think all the time about how when my parents got married in 1972, my mother would not have been able to access her own credit. She wouldn't have been able to buy a house by herself. Like those sorts of things that I think we take for granted in our day to day. And just, when I was sort of griping to this amazing historian, Alice Kessler Harris, about how things seem like they're not moving forward, she was just like, when I started working, I was a teacher in the Baltimore public schools, and I literally had to sign a contract that said if I became pregnant, I would quit the job. Like that was a thing that regularly happened in the 60s because it was before the Pregnancy Discrimination Act happened. So anytime I get sort of hopeless or despairing, I think about those sorts of things. And so even as, we're sitting up here talking about how far we have to go, we have come a very long way in a very short amount of time. And so taking that sort of historical long view, I find to be really helpful and heartening.
All right. If you're a mom, if you have a wife, or if you love a mom in your life, I encourage you to listen to the full talk and pick up Jessica's book, Screaming on the Inside. You can also check out her website, jessicagrose.com. Links to her book, her website, the full interview, and our sponsors can be found in the show notes. If you're loving PG-ish, please share this episode with a parent friend, or follow us on your favorite podcast platform and share on social so that more parents can learn and grow alongside their kiddo like you. See you next time.